28 years later, rated R, an hour and 55 minutes. This is from Sony. It's directed by Danny Boyle. It's written by Alex Garland. It stars Alfie Williams, Jodie Comer, Ray Fiennes, and Aaron Taylor Johnson. In 2008 or 2009, I was introduced to the 28 series via its prequel, 28 Weeks Later. My dad and I watched, and I still vividly remember his reaction. The zombies in the 28 series aren't technically zombies at all. They're infected with rage. They run, spit, and violently attack anything in their way. My dad, a child of the 70s who grew up on George A. Romero's slow-moving Living Dead, was utterly horrified by the rage-infected hordes sprinting after Andy and Tammy, Macintosh Muggleton and Imogen Poots, through the abandoned streets of London. For all its criticisms, 28 Weeks Later is the movie which inspired my affection for the series, and made its zombies one of my favorite creations in the genre. I frequently tell stories of a 10-year-old me being so obsessed with the red-eyed, infected zombies that I would intentionally hold my sneezes in, trying to pop a blood vessel so I could look like one of the monsters. 28 Weeks Later, at its core, is a wildly entertaining film, with a flawed but ultimately very engaging story. Its predecessor, 28 Days Later, had a smaller, more intimate feel to it, mainly focused on a small group of characters. The Danny Boyle, Alex Garland production focused on a deeper message, not about the rage of the infected, but rather the rage inside men and how it rears its ugly head when society collapses. I provide all of this context only to emphasize the lead-up. After two successful great films, both of which I would consider modern-day classics within the genre, the series just stopped. Danny Boyle, who's responsible for films like Trance, Trainspotting, and Sunshine, and writer Alex Garland, who's responsible for Civil War, Warfare, Ex Machina, Annihilation, have teamed up to bring us the third installment in the series. 28 Years Later was shot simultaneously with its sequel, The Bone Temple, and a fifth installment supposedly after that. The start of a trilogy, 2 movies in. My excitement walking in could not be overstated. Critics who I trust, Mark Kermode, Dan Merle, gave me good takes on 28 Years Later. They said it was a strangely touching movie, and it was an excellent picture. Well, folks, I'm here to tell you that that's not true. Look, I think Danny Boyle is one of the best directors on the planet. I think Alex Garland is one of the writers who inspired me to start writing movies. It brings me zero pleasure to tell you this. I hated this movie. I'm not even sure where to begin. But the opening scene is probably as good as any. 28 Days Later has an incredible opening sequence with a group of activists thinking that they are doing the right thing by setting lab monkeys free when they are actually infected with the rage virus. They caused the outbreak. 28 Weeks Later, underappreciated by fans in my opinion, has an opening sequence on a farmhouse, which is as intense and scary as any of the most frightening sequences of all time. The frenetic camera and the editing choices make it one of the most tense openings to a film ever. 28 Years Later opens with a group of children watching Teletubbies, pre-outbreak. The children know something is wrong. Young Jimmy, Rocco Haynes, anxiously eyes the door. He can hear his parents screaming, rustling. Then, the infected break in. As if someone took a sledgehammer to the camera, the frame fragments and obscures the zombie outbreak. Why? Was this a censorship issue? Did they not have the budget to show the carnage? What artistic reason could possibly explain such a decision? Young Jimmy escapes the home, leaving his brothers and sisters and family to die. Down the street, his father, a priest, is praying on the floor of a church. At the foot of the altar, he cries to his son that today is Judgment Day. The scene ends. Wait, what? That was it? In my seat, I started trying to justify the opening scene. Well, the editing tricks were cool, I guess. Scratching my head, I continued onward. I trust these names. they're not gonna mess this up completely, right? There's no way. In no time at all, we meet Jamie, Aaron Taylor Johnson, and his son Spike, Alfie Williams. Spike has turned 12, and even though their own town still thinks he's a bit too young, they allow him to go on his first patrol. Many might recognize this as the very same plot line which opened up this season of The Last of Us on Max. They just changed the setting. They're living in Scotland. A narrow causeway leads to mainland Britain, which has been quarantined for several years. At high tide, the causeway disappears under the water. Here's the thing. 28 weeks later told us the infection dies. They die after about 18 weeks of no food. That idea, and in fact, most of the second movie, is completely ignored if not entirely removed from the timeline. They have retconned it out. I understand that Alex Garland and Danny Boyle didn't have the same involvement in that sequel. I know that they are unhappy with how it turned out. As a fan, I am not. I've got to think that Garland, one of the most skilled screenwriters alive, should have been able to write a better explanation, rather than pretending the second film doesn't exist. The first infected we see on mainland Britain is a fat and slow, pathetic thing crawling on the ground, scavenging for worms. It is a far cry from the sprinting, terrifying, monstrous zombies of the first two films. Tonally, this is taking place nearly 3 decades after the first film. It would make sense that the overall feeling has changed. However, this much change doesn't feel like the same world. Jamie tells his son of a man who lives on the mainland who's a doctor. Spike knows they need a doctor because his mother, Isla, Jodie Comer, has been feeling unwell. Spike makes the brave and, frankly, illogical decision to take his mom into the mainland, and seek out this doctor to try and help cure her illness. Fans might be thinking, wow, that sounds a lot like the plot of the second film that they're ignoring. And those fans would be correct. It is impossible to ignore how similar the setup is. Ah, God. An early red flag was the absence of composer John Murphy. 28 Days Later and 28 Weeks Later had some of the best horror soundtracks ever made. Murphy's In the House, in a Heartbeat is a melody so strong, so captivating, so seat-gripping, it is forever synonymous with the franchise. John Murphy is not scoring 28 Years Later and has been replaced by Young Fathers, a musical group who have only been active since 2014. There isn't a single piece of music during the entire runtime I walked out humming to myself, much less anything that added to the dramatic tension on screen. Let's talk about the camera work. 28 Years Later was shot on an iPhone. To be clear, it's not your iPhone, but rather a multi-$1,000 iPhone with a lens and various other attachments that don't really make it a phone anymore. There is this picture going around online of this camera rig they set up for these stylized kill shots. Those moments are cool. But one has to ask, what did that add? Those moments aside, this felt like it was shot on an iPhone. And that's not inherently a bad thing. Steven Soderbergh has proven this over and over again that you could do this. There are shots in 28 Years Later where the camera wobbles or responds like a phone, and it looks genuinely terrible. Let me make my final point. The ending. There is none. There is a contrived sequence where they try to make something emotional happen. It ends up becoming rather laughable, and in the wrong way. The very ending doesn't feel earned, doesn't seem to make all that much sense. And the final image is simply ridiculous. Without spoiling anything, I've never seen a tracksuit so out of place in my entire life. This isn't the review I wanted to write today. I am deeply disappointed in 28 Years Later. I would actually go as far to say I think it's one of the worst films of the year so far, and that breaks my heart. It's easily the worst film of Danny Boyle's career, and Garland may have just given us his worst script ever. It's worse than Men. For all its commentary about Brexit, 28 Years Later has almost nothing on its mind. It crawls around like a fat, bloated infected, scouring the ground for any bit of inspiration, where none comes. It is not scary, touching, thrilling, or any combination of the three. It is boring, underwritten, and doesn't solidify its themes in the end. It's terrible. If you like this review, please like and subscribe. If you disagree with me, let me know in the comments. Let me know what you thought. Did I miss something? Or are you just as disappointed as I am? Let me know.